That dreaded noise that makes you say curse words. Let's check it out. First test you'll do, crack this line right here. This is your low pressure feed line. Crank the engine and make sure your injector pump is actually getting fuel supply. Now after you've checked that, let's move on to the solenoid. So on the solenoid, this is your power wire here and your ground right here. This is just a ground strap. It'll actually ground through the engine block. So the first step, we're going to turn the key on and make sure we hear a click in here. Now if you're alone, you can go ahead and just turn the key switch on and plug it in from here so you can actually hear the click. Now all that tells us is that we're getting some voltage and ground here. Before we move on, we really need to load test this. If you're in a pinch, you can just check it with a voltmeter, but that doesn't really tell you if this wire will hold a load. And since the voltage supply to this pump is a large suspect, we really need to load test it, so just grab a headlight. Now this has to be an incandescent bulb to do a proper load. Now grab your test leads. Make sure your test leads aren't touching. Now we're going to hook our other test leads. One to ground and one to the positive. Just like that. I'll set this off the side there. Alright, we're going to key on. So our light bulb was nice and bright. That means our circuit's carrying the load fine. Now if you're trying to find an intermittent issue, what you can do is hook up this headlight and then go start shaking the wiring harness up in the dash or along the machine. And that can help you watch the light and see when you're shaking something if it flickers or whatnot. But we're going to move on to the next step. So short of the injector pump being bad, the more likely issue is that the fuel cutoff solenoid has failed. So just because you hear it click, all that means is moving. But if the solenoid is weak, it will move a little bit, but it won't move all the way to actually allow the fuel to flow. That is our likely suspect. So we're going to take this apart and replace it and retest. Now we're going to wipe down this fuel pump head real good. Make sure we don't get any contamination inside the actual pump. And first we're going to take this line off and then these 3 screws. So 1, 2, and 3. On this one we're going to have to cut this wire. Here's what that looks like. So this is spring loaded. The spring is connected to the actual arm here. So in order for this to work, the solenoid has to be energized and pull this lever in to allow fuel to flow. As you can see from this just sitting in fuel and heat, it is a likely failure point. So let's replace it. Let's see that in action. That's the part number for this application. Got the new one here. Now this was $220 from John Deere. Now you might be tempted to hop on Amazon and purchase the $30 version of this. Don't do it. You've been warned. I really like aftermarket parts, but in this application, unless you want to be stranded, you should probably buy the OEM. So I'll suck it up. We'll install it. Don't forget your little washers. Ideally you'd get new ones. These look alright to me though. I ain't gotta go crazy tight on these. Just kind of snug. Would really suck to snap one of these studs off after spending $200. Check your seal and make sure it's good. Ideally you'd replace it. Mine looks fine though. And also be careful not to get any contamination in the pump, but wipe this sealing surface down as well. And I'm gonna slide this just right back on top. You'll kind of feel some pressure as you're installing it, and that's that spring-loaded lever you're feeling. Just be gentle. And just snug up all your bolts. Make sure you don't crank them down. Now grab you just some regular old mechanics wire and be sure and loop through all these nuts. That wasn't too hard to start. All right, let's go get it hot. It seems to be working great. Now after you've ran it a while, you might want to make sure that it's not leaking any fuel or anything.